When we talk about research design, terms like mixed method, multi-method, mixed data often get thrown around as if they mean the same thing. But in reality, these concepts have evolved as over the last few decades. And they've been shaped by philosophical debates, methodological innovations, and even academic politics. So we're going to walk through that history step by step. So before the 1980s, the research world was mostly divided into two separate camps. Quantitative research dominated much of the social sciences, especially in psychology, education, sociology, and qualitative traditions like ethnography, phenomenology, and grounded theory were practiced, but often within their own silos, and they were marginalized within mainstream journals and programs. The term multi-method existed, but it was used casually. It usually meant more than one data collection technique and almost always stayed within a single paradigm. For example, two qualitative methods or two quantitative methods in one study. There wasn't much thinking yet about combining qualitative and quantitative approaches. In the 1980s, the idea of different approaches together started to gain traction through the concept of triangulation. So that's when that concept kind of began to come onto the stage. Think about Denzen in 1978 or Jick in 1979. They argued that using multiple methods could give you a fuller and more credible picture of a phenomenon. But importantly, early multi-method in this period still tended to mean qualitative plus qualitative or quantitative plus quantitative. Mixing paradigms, qualitative and quantitative together, wasn't yet common. And the terminology to distinguish these combinations wasn't formalized yet. In the 1990s, you could kind of call this period the paradigm wars and early mixed method movement. And this is when I was first learning about it. And it was so debated. And I remember I would hear from one faculty member, one thing, and then I'd go and from another faculty member and hear something totally contradictory from them. And I would observe faculty members like arguing and debating over this. And so by the late 1980s, the so-called paradigm wars, the clash between quantitative and qualitative researchers were at their peak. By the 1990s, the hostilities had started to cool, but it was still a period where confusion deepened. Studies were called mixed, even when they were multi-method. Researchers began to acknowledge that different approaches could be complementary rather than competing. One major milestone came when Green, Caroselli, and Graham in 1998, they proposed a framework which outlined a way of combining methods, things like triangulation, complementary, and development. The phrase mixed methods began to appear more often in publications, but there was still no universally agreed on definition of what that meant or entailed yet. There was a lot of experimenting, but this field still lacked shared language. It wasn't until the early 2000s when there really was a turning point. So in the 1990s, I was in my master's program and I started my doctoral program in the early 2000s. In 2003, I hate pronouncing last names. I will just tell you that. So I mess them up all the time. So pardon me for, not pronouncing them correctly. But Tasha Corey and Ted Lee published the Handbook of Mixed Methods in Social and Behavioral Research. This book really defined mixed methods explicitly as combining qualitative and quantitative approaches into a single study. That same year, Janice Morris helped clarify things by distinguishing multi-method, i.e. using multiple methods in the same paradigm, with mixed methods, which is the integration of different paradigms. The idea of mixed data sets containing both numbers and narratives, wasn't widely discussed as its own category at this point. Between 2004 and 2005, it's like Creswell's era. In 2004, Johnson and Onwoo Buzzy described mixed methods research as a third paradigm, often tied to the philosophy of pragmatism. And remember that pragmatism really has to do with the practicality of research. Creswell and Clark began publishing their now famous design typologies: sequential, explanatory, convergent, parallel, and so on. These frameworks gave researchers a toolkit and a vocabulary and helped standardize the use of mixed methods research in fields like education, health, the social sciences. By now, the distinctions were mixed method means qualitative combined with quantitative. Multi-methods means multiple methods within one paradigm. Now, I will say that in the last 6 months, despite me telling you like this happened back in like the 2004 to 2007, I have been involved in 2 conversations in the last like 3 to 6 months where researchers have been still arguing about this, about that, mixed method and multi-method and what that means, and really, are they 2 different things or are they the same thing? So despite the fact that this timeline is saying like, oh, like this happened in these times, the discussion is not over, as you will see as we move on. So mixed methods continued to grow, but critics began to push back. Green in 2007 and 2008 argued that mixed method research shouldn't be a procedural toolkit, as Creswell and Clark had kind of provided in the previous time. Green also stated that it's a philosophical stance about values and purpose. Denson in 2010 warned against oversimplification of the paradigm differences, arguing that merging them isn't as easy as it sounds. Around this time, mixed data started to be used more explicitly, often describing data sets that contain both numbers and narratives, though sometimes without a clear plan for integration. 2010 through 2008, it's more about consolidation and global spread. From 2010 onward, Creswell and Clark's later editions, like in 2011, 2018, cemented the design typologies in their textbook. By this point, mixed methods was widely used in education, health sciences, evaluation, and more. Integration became the defining feature of mixed methods research. Poor integration studies, labeled as mixed method research, became a recurring critique in journals. And so it really had become part of like the overall research kind of domain. Applied researchers began explicitly labeling some projects involving mixed data, especially in program evaluation or surveys that combined closed and open-ended questions. However, debates persisted over whether pragmatism should be the default philosophical foundation or whether other stances like transformative or critical should be more prominent. So now we're kind of over the last like 7 years, from 2018 to present, In the past few years, the discussion has become more nuanced. Scholars are asking, does integration have to happen at all stages? Does it have to happen at the both, like at the design stage and the data collection and the data analysis and the interpretation for something to count as mixed methods? We're also seeing a call for clearer reporting standards to prevent studies with only like token integration from being labeled as mixed methods research. So they're looking at, developing checklists similar to today. Multi-method, mixed method, and mixed data are more clearly distinguished in methodological training. But if you scan published literature, you will still find confusion. And that's why understanding this history matters. It's why I decided to do this presentation, because I wanted to make sure that you had clear understanding kind of how these concepts have changed over time, so that when you're looking at literature, you might see how the language has been used in different ways, depending on, when that article was published. We still see two main ongoing issues, and that's the mislabeling of studies, a multi-method still being called mixed methods. And we see a rise in the use of mixed data in practice, but without a strong articulation of the theoretical base being used to justify the use of mixed data. I want you to understand that this same kind of pattern has happened in all different areas of research. In the development of case study or phenomenology or grounded theory, right? Like you have the initial ideas, the initial people who are using it, who do the initial writing, more people join in, research borrows language from each other, things are being done in silos, so they're using different language. Then we hit, the birth of the internet, and there's a lot more cross-pollination among researchers, and they're using different language. And so then there's a movement to kind of standardize the language. And it creates a really confusing kind of environment for new researchers. And so the older the resource you're looking at, probably the more ambiguous the terminology, and the more recent the publication, hopefully it's using more standardized terminology.